Hey all, Josh here, and welcome to the fourth part of my Rocky-thon. In this I'll review Rocky 4. And I gotta say, I've been getting a few messages about this movie, even preempting my review of it. I was thinking about it, and I was initially going to give a much more negative review than I'm about to give, but I actually went back and revisited different parts of the movie and found myself enjoying them more than I did. And while I'm still not going to give it a great review, I must say that a lot of it is a bit more fun than I had initially had, taken as individual parts. Unfortunately, I think that is this movie's main problem. It just doesn't work for me, and a lot of people may disagree, but this is actually my least favorite movie of the franchise. I actually found 5 had much more legitimacy than 4 here, but that's the next review. To start, this movie basically revolves around Rocky fighting Ivan Drago, aka Dolph Lundgren, in a kind of Cold War parable, boxing, in the boxing ring. And overall, I didn't really think this movie progressed the story much. I mean, Rocky has a kid now, but the kid doesn't really play into it, and there's just some really random shit that brings it down. I mean, they buy a robot at the beginning, and it has the creepiest entrance I have ever seen. It has this like weird electronic music playing in the background. It goes, "Happy birthday, Polly," and it's got this. If anyone remembers the movie Short Circuit, it kind of looks like that, except with a more bulbous head. And it's just played for comedic relief. That's so bad. I wasn't laughing at all. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And I mean, people are like, "Oh, this is a fun movie. You're not really meant to take it serious. It's like a comic book." I thought 3 did that better. I mean, I thought 3 was kind of that silly, over-the-top vibe, but it at least had more story legitimacy, and it seemed like a better movie. Unfortunately, this movie suffers from kind of innumerable training sequences. There's a lot of montages in general, some of them meant to portray mood, some of them meant to be training sequences. There's literally 2 training sequences back to back here that is so ridiculous. This movie felt like they were padding time. They didn't really have much of a plot, and particularly Apollo Creed gets back in the ring in this one, and it has about a 4 or 5 minute introduction sequence that was so pointless. I don't know why they did it. And I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, a lot of this is just kind of symbolic of the excess of the 80s. You know what? I don't care. Just because it's symbolic of the excess of the 80s doesn't mean I have to like it. And unfortunately, that's the way I feel about this movie. It's not a terrible movie. I mean, okay, you know what? I actually do think it's a pretty terrible movie. But, I mean, there are some good parts to it. Well, I liked the song Hearts on Fire. Yeah, that's about it, really. I really didn't enjoy this. All the training sequences seem over the top. Instead of climbing the stairs in this one, he climbs a mountain. And there didn't really seem to be any strategy to the fight. And I mean, as much as Rocky really is this kind of folk hero at this point, where he can just survive anything because he's Rocky, I really disliked how the final fight really didn't rely on anything other than the fact that he was Rocky. I mean, even in the third one, he had this kind of strategy of wearing Mr. T, aka Clubber Lang, down. And you're like, okay, that's unrealistic, but, it kind of makes sense, because he's a big, bulky fighter. In this one, Ivan Drago is literally taking steroids, injecting them into himself, and training like a fucking machine. He's like twice the size of Sylvester Stallone, and it's stupid. It just doesn't make any sense to have his strategy be, "Oh, if he hits me enough, then he'll lose his will." That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, and not to mention the fact that plot developments in this movie don't make matters any better. The inclusion of Apollo Creed, again, I did like. There's actually a really... Oh, that's one thing I did like. There was a great scene between Apollo Creed and Sylvester Stallone in the earlier portions of this movie that I thought really was a great symbol of friendship, and really the only good dramatics in this movie, in my opinion. I didn't feel the love between Adrian. Paulie was played off more as comic relief that didn't make any sense to me, because I don't like Paulie. I'm not going to be finding him all that funny. And I just don't understand. The Carl Weathers character of Apollo Creed, they do something to him in this movie that just really seemed cheap to me. It seemed like a cheap way to draw out emotion. And that's what I think the majority of this movie is. It just seemed cheap, like they didn't really take the time to do anything. I mean, the money is definitely showing on screen. There's a lot of great cinematography in this movie. This is clearly a much bigger scale movie. But overall, I just can't recommend this. Between the innumerable training and montage sequences, and just the lack of story in general, and I don't even know what to say. I didn't. Also, the ridiculous, preachy ending of this movie was so over the top that I was just rolling my eyes. I mean, I was rolling my eyes before because there was a fucking robot walking around that's never mentioned again, by the way. But I didn't like it. You know, I'm sorry. I said I wouldn't just give that negative a review, but that's really just the way I feel, unfortunately. I mean, I would maybe sit through this movie again if someone wanted me to, but I can't see myself really revisiting this one at any time. It didn't really do anything for me. What can I say? Sylvester Stallone's low point. I can definitely see why they didn't get him to direct 5. There may have been extenuating issues. I'm not saying that's because of it, but could very well be. Declining box office sales notwithstanding, perhaps. Anyway, overall, the characters I guess I should get to. Sylvester Stallone, you know what? He plays Rocky. Seems to tread over the same issues in this one as he did in the third one, which kind of decreased the legitimacy of this movie even further for me. Talia Shire as Adrian, she didn't have anything to do, so I really can't judge her. You know what? Like I said, Burt Young as Paulie. What can I say? Like I said, I've never really liked Paulie. His transition to comedic relief, maybe to the movie's detriment, but he didn't really do anything in this movie. Like the third one, I told you had that subplot at the beginning of the movie that at least was interesting, even if they did kind of drop it. But this one, he just literally walks around insulting people, and I'm supposed to find it endearing? No, I'm sorry, I don't. The sound in this movie is really what is something worth talking about, though, because this movie is basically a jukebox of the 80s. It plays a tons of songs that from Survivor, John Cafferty for his Hearts of Fire, I told you, or Hearts on Fire, I told you, and of course, you know, Not Gonna Fly Now. Sorry, that's one thing I did want to mention is that Bill Conti is not doing the music for this movie, so it is all these kind of 80s pop tunes. There's not really much of a score to speak of. It's kind of weak what it is, but the music maybe makes it up for some people. It's not that I hate the music in and of itself. I can't say that I love it. It's not bad. Some of them are better than others. Like I said, I do really enjoy Hearts on Fire, but it just didn't make up for the rest of the faults of the movie. Now, I'm not saying that this is the worst movie I've ever seen. No, far from it. But maybe taken in the right mindset going into it, you might enjoy it more. But I at least still look for some legitimacy in the story, even if it's very little, or it needs to be fun. And I didn't really find this either of those things. Your opinion may vary, but what can I say?